And my dad was a pilot in World War II. We had so many near-death experiences flying with him.
You should always fly a little bit scared.
They forgot to put the gas cap on one of the tip tanks. So the gas was just shooting out.
A very attractive girl came into my class and said, "Is Kevin Kelly here?" Right here. Next day, my head was shaved, and I never saw that girl again, by the way.
You were essentially baited and switched with this hot chick?
He puts his arm around my little boy and he says, "Hey man, is this your kid?" And I reach in my pocket. I pulled it right out, I put his finger, and that guy took off running.
Welcome to this episode of Lock, Load, and Listen. I'm your host, Michael Pierce. Today we have Kevin Kelly, disruptor, former war hero, and all-around badass. Kevin Kelly, welcome. Thanks for being a guest on Lock, Load, and Listen, the podcast where we say anything the fuck we want. And there's no rules and no regulations and no decorum. Kind of like how you've lived your life after you left the military.
That is just my style these days.
If we go back to when you were growing up, I've always wanted to ask a Top Gun pilot some of these questions. You know, how does a kid become a Top Gun pilot? It's so many kids' dreams. And can you tell us a little bit about how you got into that and flying in general? Because I was an amateur pilot too, but I want to hear this, how it started.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm not a Top Gun pilot, although I did fly in the Navy and the Air Force fighters.
Close enough.
Yeah, close enough, right? But for the sticklers, that's important.
Okay, yeah, got it.
Yeah, so I grew up we moved from kind of West Philadelphia out into the suburbs, the collar counties around Philadelphia. I went to an all-boys Catholic high school, and I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. I got accepted into Villanova University, and my senior year, a couple of Marines came in, and those guys looked really sharp. And I said, "Man, these guys are squared away. I really, respect these guys." And I filled out some paperwork for an NROTC scholarship, and then that was the end of that. I went to Villanova. I was working to pay my way through Villanova, which, by way of reference, was about $3,000 a semester back in the day. It's probably closer to $90,000 now. I was sitting in an economics class my freshman year. I was actually landscaping for an old Irish guy who taught me a great work ethic. And a very attractive girl came into my class and said, "Is Kevin Kelly here?" And I remember she was beautiful, Michael. And I said, "Right here, So I followed her across campus, probably hitting on her the whole way, and showed up at John Barry Hall, which is the kind of the Navy ROTC hall. They informed me that I had a full 4-year scholarship to Villanova, which I would be crazy not to take.
Wow.
The next day, my head was shaved. Some Marine Corps gunnery sergeant was screaming at me, and I said, "I'll probably quit tomorrow." And I never saw that girl again, by the way. And, it's just one of those things. I got into it. I really enjoyed it. I liked the esprit de corps, and I couldn't afford to not do it, quite frankly. And then at the end of I took a battery of tests, my junior and senior year, got an aviation billet, and then I was driving my 1982 Camaro Berlinetta Baby Blue down to Pensacola, Florida, with all my worldly possessions in it, and that was the beginning of that.
Wow, that's quite a story. So you were essentially baited and switched with this hot chick?
Basically.
That's how you were...
I didn't know if that was an approved technique or not. But that's how
that's funny. So the actual flying of it all. So I got my learner's license when I was 14, and my dad was a pilot in World War II. He was a bomber pilot, and he really wanted me to fly. But the problem is, we had so many near-death experiences flying with him. After, when I was growing up, he obviously, it was way after World War II. He had me when he was in his 40s.
Yeah.
It kind of turned me off. I had a couple of near death. Did you ever have any experience like that was, hair raising or your life was in jeopardy?
Well, yeah, I have. I mean, when you're operating around an aircraft carrier in particular, it's just a dangerous environment. We would typically lose 1 to 2 personnel, not necessarily pilots, although I have lost my share of of fighter pilot buddies over the years. As a matter of fact, when we first got our wings, we sat in a room, and I distinctly remember someone telling us, before if you make a career of this, you'll run out of fingers and toes before you run out of the amount of, before you hit the amount of friends you'll lose in this business. So it's inherently dangerous, but it's like an orchestra on an aircraft carrier. The average age is 19, 20 years old on the deck of an aircraft carrier. It's pretty amazing what we can get done, and some of the technologies they use there, like how they move aircraft around an aircraft carrier, is literally with bolts and screws on a big Ouija board. They call it the Ouija board, and they move them around. They've tried to integrate technology, and into that process, but to this day, it still remains the Ouija board with screws and washers and bolts that represent different configurations on airplanes. And to my knowledge, to that day, that's still the way it goes. As far as near-death experiences, I had a bunch. You're flying around at night in bad weather, or when I was flying with students as an instructor pilot at Luke Air Force Base. One of the very dangerous things is you should always fly a little bit scared. And when you have a student on your wing who's a pretty strong student, if you have a weak student, your eyes are all over them the whole flight. But if you have a strong student, you give them a little more leeway and you kind of treat them as a little more mature, and that's a mistake. Because at the end of the day, they're still students. They get overwhelmed. And I remember one time we were coming back from just a routine bombing training mission down in the ranges of southern Phoenix, and a kid was behind me. We had 4 airplanes in a row, and he just got a little bit of closure on me and got kind of overwhelmed and task saturated, and he missed me by about a foot. He went flying past me. He had no idea.
Whoa, boy.
And that was just one time that pops in my head. We could go on for hours of different times. So I've outlived my 9 lives, I guess. And
that's funny. So when my dad was flying, he had a seaplane, and I was on the beach on this lake in Canada, and he was landing to come pick us up, and he landed. Then he flipped the seaplane. It was big waves, and he flipped over, like turtled it. And so I think I was 9 or 10. I thought, shit, Dad's dead. They went and picked him up, and he swam in, and he was fine. But it was very traumatic for a kid. And then I had an incident when I was 13, and we were flying in a small private plane, a Learjet that has tip tanks. And we were just rotating, and they forgot to put the gas cap on one of the tip tanks. So the gas was just like shooting out. I was just a kid, right? I looked out the window. I'm like, hey, guys, the gas tap's off. And so they immediately, cut the throttles, and we skidded off the runway, and that would have been game over. I got this medal from Transportation Authority. It was in Canada. It was in Toronto, I think. So I had all these bad experiences. I just gave up flying. I didn't like it anymore.
Oddly enough, most of the casualties happen because when you're new, you fly scared, right? You don't know a lot.
You get complacent, right? You get complacent.
You get complacent around the 500-hour mark. You're feeling good. You're tactically getting more sound, and then you kind of just get a little bit. Cocky's not the right word, but maybe it's complacent, and that's where you see typically a spike in accidents or casualties along a career path. So I had a boss early on who said, Kelly, always fly a little bit scared, and I took that to heart, so I always did.
I think that's good advice. But can I go back to something you said earlier about your ROTC, your scholarship? I know you have kids. I have kids too. And this conversation comes up a lot now about college. College is ridiculously expensive. It's turned into a very profitable business model for institutions of higher learning. Is it worth it? What do you tell your kids? I mean, I don't want to tell my kids I don't think they should go to college, but this little voice inside of me now is going, there are other paths for success. And I'm not sure that college, and depending on what you study in college, like some liberal arts degree, is that really going to allow you to achieve your goals? Or is it more just experiential and social and emotional development for $100K a year? I have this debate with my wife constantly.
Yeah, I talk about this quite a bit. Matter of fact, I was just on the Bitcoin Spaces talking about this. I was asked to speak at the ASU Business School, and I forget, I can't remember the name of it, I apologize, but come in and talk to some kids about, what I thought, because I'm in business now, I'm an entrepreneur of sorts, and I just basically told them, I said, if you're sitting in a seat and what what you're studying to become can be overcome by AI in the next few years, which it will. You should get up and walk out. And I'm reminded of Mike Rowe. If you know Mike Rowe, the Dirty Jobs guy, Mike's a great guy.
Yeah.
I'll probably get the numbers wrong, but he was giving a speech and he said, the United States Navy called him, we have to build 2 nuclear-powered aircraft every year. And I think they called and they said, Mike, can you help us get some electricians? And he said, I don't know, it's pretty tight out there, but I'll try. And how many do you need? And they said, we need 50,000, right? 50,000. Now, and they said, well, where can you help us? He said, I thought you were going to ask me for 2. He said, well, where are they all? He goes, I'll tell you where they are. They're in the 8th grade. We have.
That's right.
Yeah, we have, what we've done is we've prioritized this kind of academic industrial complex, which is college, which has all manner of nonsense degrees. You get a Chilean lesbian poetry studies degree. What are you going to do with that? You only need so many baristas at Starbucks and $200,000 and $300,000 in debt, right? So what I tell my kids is I'm highly going to, and again, my kids are probably, my oldest is 5 years away from college, at least 6, maybe 6. I am going to highly encourage them to get a skill set, a trade, and then learn that trade, and master that trade, and then we'll turn it into a business. I have breakfast with a guy named Big J. I said, Big J, what do you do? And he goes, man, I don't do shit. I drink coffee with you in the morning. And he's got a fleet of trucks, HVAC, electrical, and he's done really, really well. Never went to college. And I think we're going to see that turn where bringing value, physical value into the marketplace is going to be way outnumbered because we're outsourcing our intellectual power to AI, which is parabolic. We haven't seen anything yet. And then when you combine that with robotics, you should really think hard about what it is you're doing right now, and is that going to go away in a few years?
I think that's fascinating. Before we get into your asymmetrical view of business, because it served you very well, it served me well too. You and I are very similar in that way. I want to just go back to the military. I just always wanted to ask you this. I think you have some inside knowledge on our current defense minister, Pete Hegseth. And I'm just curious to know what your thoughts. I don't know him, but I think you do, and we discussed it a little. He sounds like a great guy. Do you think the changes that he wants to make to the military are additive? From my point of view, they seem to be. Is he changing standards in ways that you can explain to us?
Yeah, I don't know Pete Hegseth personally. I met him a few times, but Pete's,
yeah.
When you're at that level, you meet a lot of people, and it's easy to forget.
Sure.
People as forgetful as me. But I did meet him when he was, when I first met him, he was giving a speak to the Republican Jewish Coalition in Philadelphia. I was tangentially involved in politics in Philly because I wanted to kind of turn that city around and at least get a 2-party system going there. Wasn't successful. But Pete came and gave a talk. I said, man, this guy's got something. And I think he was running a foundation called like Vets for Freedom or something like that. I probably got the name wrong. But I knew instantly this guy's got a lot of charisma, he's sharp, a good-looking guy. So anyway, he ended up going to Fox News, and every once in a while I'd send him a story via text. I had his cell phone number, and he'd help out or highlight something that I thought needed to be highlighted. I'll stop about Pete in a second. The warrior culture inside the military was decimated, and throughout my career, you were keenly aware of you were either in the warrior class or you were in the political class. The political class being very left-wing leaning. They were almost like selected and put into positions of power, not deserved. And that's the one thing that I really hated about seeing that come to fruition was the one great thing about the military is it's a pure meritocracy. It doesn't matter where you came from, doesn't matter what the color of your skin is, doesn't matter what your religion is. It's all, you get ranked. Every time you get a fitness report, or in the Air Force we call it an OPR, you got ranked 1 through 17 lieutenants, you knew where you stood. And that was I think that was just the best way to do business because it's such an unforgiving business that if you start implementing things that are not based on pure merit, things can go bad real quickly. So that's kind of how the military metastasized. And for the longest time, it had been like a separate part of the government that was that meritocracy. Yeah, the government was politicized, the deep state, all that kind of stuff, the administrative state. But the military was upblown, and the left kind of went in and did its thing. Now we fast forward to today, I have a few friends who've made it. Matter of fact, the commander of the Indo-Pacific, Admiral Paparo, was one of my instructors in flight school. Wonderful guy, tremendous warrior. He's still in. And a handful of others. Matter of fact, Dan Raisin-Kane, who's now the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, is a friend of mine. Another warrior. Matter of fact, they pulled him out of retirement to appoint him to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. What Pete Hegseth is doing now is he's reinstituting that warrior culture, that meritocracy culture. It's going to take a while, but they're identifying people who are kind of been politicized in positions of leadership. They're shrinking the amount of leadership, by the way. I think there was something like 40 four-star, admirals and generals, whereas during World War II, I'm going to get the numbers right, there were like 9, right? So like we've kind of gotten away from the real mission of the military, and I think Pete and this administration in particular are reinstituting that warrior culture inside the military. It's led to an increase in recruitment. We were down 40%, now we're meeting all our goals. And I would say personally, a couple of years ago, I would have not allowed my sons to enlist in the military or become an officer in the military, and now I've changed that view just because of what I see as a good turn of direction.
I think it's a good segue into one more thing that we have in common ideologically, and this is obviously a big one for me. This podcast, as you know, is sponsored by American Gun Owners, and that is a company I am the CEO of, and you are an investor in. I'm a big fan of the Second Amendment. Obviously, I grew up as a gun guy, hunting and fishing and self-defense, and my kids all shoot. We all hunt still, and we eat what we kill, and we think everyone has a right to defend themselves. I spend a good half of my life in Los Angeles, which is very, very strange now. I know you live in Arizona, so you don't have some of the laws that we have here. The laws are slowly changing, but it is frightening what's happened in Southern California. The laws have been interpreted in a way up until recently where you can't even defend your own home. The Castle Doctrine doesn't apply. It was a modified Castle Doctrine, which means you can only defend yourself, and your force has to be commensurate with the person who's coming in. So if he comes in and he's carrying a gun, but he's not pointing it at you, you can't shoot him. You can't do anything. You can ask him to leave. And if you shoot him when he's turned around, you're going to jail. Now, it's starting to change because there's been some landmark decisions. The NRA has been very, very effective in changing the laws. The Supreme Court's handed down a big one, New York Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruin, which now basically gives everyone the right to not only own a gun, because that's enshrined in the Second Amendment, but to carry a gun. If you're a qualified applicant, even in California now, you will get a permit. Now, one of the things that we're doing at AGO, and you know this, is making it easier for people to get access to a permit to carry a gun, to own a gun, and a self-defense gun for their home, and instruction that's built in with the NRA. And I think someone like you is incredibly additive to our message. You came from the military. You are the American success story, and it's great to have people like you that we can tangibly see and touch. And so I know so many young people in my life. I mentor tons of teens. There just aren't any role models anymore. And, I know you pretty damn well, and you are what you appear to be. No one handed you shit. I've seen you build a business empire. I've seen you give back to causes that you believe in, defend the principles of this country and the democracy that it's based on, and support all the things that I hold dear. So I want you to just tell me a little bit what your thought process was with American Gun Owners, because you have investments in lots of stuff. We can go into that in a second. I want our audience to hear just some of the stuff you're in, but talk to me a little bit about how American Gun Owners resonated with you.
I mean, practically speaking, in the military, you get some training. You get a 9mm that you carry when you fly. And that's all well and good, and I became a decent shot. I got a sharpshooter ribbon in both the pistol and the rifle, but it's a perishable skill, right? So one of the things that's very important that people should know is shooting at a range and shooting in real life are two different things. So my training, to the extent I had some Navy SEAL buddies that I go training with, and they taught me all kinds of good stuff. But again, it's a perishable skill. I mean, if you don't continuously keep up, you're going to lose that skill. It's a lot like flying in that respect, right?
Yeah.
I got in an airplane right now. You would never know that I flew F-16s or flew jets off aircraft carriers. It's the way it goes.
Remind me not to fly with you then.
Yeah, give me a couple hours, to get back up to speed. But anyway, I lived in Philadelphia toward the tail end of my career. I was flying out of Atlantic City, F-16s out of Atlantic City. And we lived in a place called Northern Liberties. And at the time, it was right on the edge of like Kensington and Girard Avenue. Now, if you don't know where Kensington in Philadelphia is, if you see these videos where it's almost like the zombie apocalypse, that's K&A under the trestle, where people are just kind of on that Gronk drink and they're just all just kind of, you'll go for miles and people are just all drugged out. So we constantly had flowing into our neighborhood, people coming from K&A to either break into your car or to hold people up or whatever. And Philadelphia being a blue city, the Pennsylvania, the state, its Second Amendment says the citizen's right to bear arms shall not be questioned. Period. Even more clear than the Second Amendment to the Constitution. But in Pennsylvania, because of who's running it, they make it very difficult to get a concealed carry license. So the trick there was you'd have to go out into the suburbs, get it, but then it would be valid in the city. You couldn't get it in the city. They just wrapped themselves in an impenetrable veneer of bureaucracy by design.
Yeah.
So I would carry in Philly because it's a dangerous place, especially where I lived, and I had small children at the time. I had my first son, he was 2 years old. We used to walk around the corner to a place called the Sugar House Casino. The Sugar House Casino was under construction. It's fully built now on Delaware Avenue. So there were these big sewer pipes there, those big concrete sewer pipes. And we would walk around there with my son Roman, and he would go down the other end. It was probably 50 feet to the other end, and we'd say, hello, hello, hello. And he would be on the other end, I'd see his little feet there, and he got a big kick out of that.
Yeah.
Well, one day we did that, and I see this big pair of sneakers. I'm looking through the pipe, and I see this big pair of sneakers standing next to him. So I look up, and there's a pretty not so great looking guy standing next to him, and I just started making a beeline. Now, at the time, I was carrying the 380 ACP in my front pocket because, it was easy to carry. It wasn't ostentatious. I didn't want any hassle from anybody. You can just put it in your front pocket, literally put 2 fingers in, pull it out, and you're ready to go. Doesn't pack a heck of a punch, but it's better than anything. So I started, making a beeline toward this guy, and he puts his arm around my little boy, and he says, hey man, is this your kid? I go, yeah, it is. And I'm making my way to him the whole time. And he goes, yeah, man, you got $20, man? And he kind of pulls my son in real tight. I go, yeah, I got it. Like I'm reaching in my pocket. I pulled it right out, I put this finger, and that guy took off running, right? So, did I overreact? I don't think so. I'm pretty, I grew up in Philly. I'm pretty street smart. I got the hood smarts, I guess. So that guy was up to no good. But just imagine if I didn't have that, right? I'm kind of a victim. So I always say it's better to have it, not need it, than to need it and not have it. And that right as a United States citizen to defend myself. Forget about what people say, the Second Amendment was because you could go hunt and all that other happy horseshit. No. It's so that I can defend myself, not only in that situation, in situations like it. I had to draw another time in Philly, I won't bore you with the story, but it's also against a tyrannical government. And a lot of people don't know that. Our founders understood that when power accretes to a centralized government, there's got to be a check upon that. Our Constitution gave power first from God, to the citizens, who then gave it to, the government. So that's the pecking order. When it gets inverted and the government then gives the citizens their rights, that's a very dangerous time. Antithetical to our founders, antithetical to the founding of our country. And
100% agreed.
The Second Amendment was put in to make sure that we could fight back against that if indeed that tyranny manifests itself, which it always does. People might say that that's crazy, but if you read the Federalist Papers, you know exactly what I'm saying is the truth.
It's very clear in there, and people don't know that.
That's right.
It's interesting, Kevin. I've told this story before. I'm not going to tell it I've had to use my right to defend my wife on 2 occasions. Once, it was the threat that I actually legally owned a gun and knew how to use it. She is the precedent case for felony stalking in LA County. So when she was younger, when I met her, she'd done a lot of commercials and stuff, and her ex-boyfriend just wouldn't leave her alone. And he did some bad things, and he went to jail for 3 years, federal penitentiary. And when he got out, he called again, and I took the call. And I said to him, so what do you want? Because if you come over, I'll give you my address. You can come over if you want. It's up to you. But just know that if you do come over, I'm legally armed, and I know how to use my weapon, and I advise you not to come over. And he said, and he never called back again. That was that. And then the second time in my house in LA, a guy tried to break into our house at like 1 a.m. I had my self-defense shotgun. I snuck up behind him, put him on the ground with the butt of the gun, and sent him on his way. Part of the inspiration for me starting this business is there's so many people like me who don't feel safe, and unfortunately, the police just can't get there in time. They're not going to be able to help you. I wish that maybe the police could, but it's impossible. They don't have the resources. So anyway, I don't know where we're going with this. I get kind of emotional about this one.
Like, I think the average response time is 22 minutes. What happened to me, what happened to you took 22
you're
seconds.
You're dead.
Right? So,
you're
and
dead.
I can tell you other stories. My next door neighbor was bound and gagged. And, the only reason they didn't kill him is because they just didn't decide to kill him. For a day and a half, they laid there bound and gagged with his girlfriend because guys came in and strong-arm robbed them in their house. Another young girl just graduated architect school, was walking home with her mother. Guys pull up in a car. She had one of those fake Fendi bags that she probably bought out of a trunk for $30, and they sell these fake bags. They grabbed the thing. She just instinctively kind of grabbed back. They shot her dead in front of her mother, right? So the point is, if we're not armed, the bad guys are armed. They don't obey the laws. You need to be able to protect yourself, and it's foolish. It's actually foolish. And a lot of people live in this foolish notion that, I'll defend myself with a bat or I'll call the police. I mean, some of the greatest gun advocates are the people who have become victims and now understand that their previous notions were just fantasy and foolishness.
You're like a military trained badass. I mean, and you're probably not feeling that secure without your firearm and your right to carry it. And same with me, but I talked to tons of people, mostly women in Los Angeles, who are afraid to even go out now. They have pepper spray. That doesn't make them feel good. They all want to be able to own a gun and carry it and get instruction. And that's what we're building it, and that's what we're selling. So I don't want to spend too much time on that. But let's move on more to your career as an entrepreneur, which I find really fascinating and also very inspiring. So you've been involved in some very big brands like Planet Fitness and a bunch of other ones. Tell me a little bit about how you did that. Like, how did you know what to invest? And you had a kind of an unconventional business background. I actually think it's very relevant to investing, but that's another story. You don't have to go to get an MBA from Harvard to be an entrepreneur or a venture capitalist. Tell us your story.
Yeah, so I was 25 years in the military, and toward the end of my career, I had some success in my part-time building houses during the real estate boom, flipping houses and doing little things. But I knew that I didn't want to go fly for the airlines. For most,
right.
Yeah, and I was long in the tooth, right? If you spend 25 years in the military, it's harder to go to the airlines and, get that kind of seniority. It just didn't have any appeal to me. So I wrote a business plan. I bought a building with some guys I brought in, and it turned out 2008 happened. My partners were stealing from me. I got instantaneously, while I'm still in active duty, about to deploy to Afghanistan, I got a $4.5 million judgment against me. I was getting married. I lost my security clearance because I had a $4.5 million judgment just pop up. How it came about was I had a building that was valued at $9 million. In one day, the bank or the lender reassessed it at $4.5 and basically claimed I was in default. Right? I said I never missed a payment, and just give me the next $1 million and we'll finish it. We'll open the business and I'll uphold my end of the bargain and I'll pay you back. But everybody was panicking back then. So all of a sudden, my life just became awful. I remember I had $1,000 in the bank. I lost my security clearance. My friends are like, listen, you can't fly. We're preparing to go to war. We'll keep you on as long as we can, but you got to sort this out. So that experience made me what I'll say anti-fragile. I made my way through it with integrity intact. I never had to declare bankruptcy. I settled the whole thing. I got my security clearance back, but it showed me how quickly, through no fault of your own, you could get in a really bad spot. And again, at a high level, it's just a matter of if you get knocked down, which you will. The world doesn't care about your plans. No plan survives first contact with the enemy. Mike Tyson says, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face, right? Well, the world is out there to punch you in the face. That single experience kind of taught me. I was forced to become a lawyer, a psychologist, a businessman, a CPA, all because I had to get myself out of this hole that, and I'm not a victim, but what happened to me was, it was what it was. That made me, but at that point, I knew about Planet Fitness. I met with some partners of mine, guys I grew up with, that I knew I could trust. By the way, trust in a partnership is just, it's not about signed documents or anything else. You need to be able to trust your partners. Being a partner with somebody in business is more of an entanglement than getting married, quite frankly.
I agree.
So please trust your partners and select the right partners. But then we had a chance to go, and we got a chance to open up Planet Fitnesses in Arizona. We did that. One of my partners was a money guy. He brought the money. We brought the know-how and the experience. My one partner ran a restaurant, so I knew we could run business gyms. I was pretty good at negotiating leases and finding good sites. So we made a great team. We sold that. We had exits. And now I've been involved in a bunch of other brands, Pop-Up Bagel, The Joint Chiropractic, also involved in Crumble Cookies. So all these great brands. And then like you, Mike, I invest in certain things that I see have potential. And AGO is obviously one of those things that I'm just super excited to be a part of.
It's funny, Kevin. There's another great adage. I think it's Churchill. He said, the definition of success is stumbling from one failure to another with no loss of enthusiasm. I tell this story all the time. I was a guest at a university recently for their convocation. They asked me, "Oh my God, you've been so successful with all these companies. How do you pick winners?" I'm like, fucking guys, all you see are the winners. You don't see the losers. Or the deal that I lost, enough money to buy a nice house. That doesn't feel so well. And it's no fault of mine. This was right during the pandemic, right before the pandemic. I had the exclusive rights to sell coffee at all Walmarts. All Walmarts. There was no coffee franchise. So we started Liftoff Coffee. And then the pandemic hit. And we already spent all this CapEx. We built all these thousands and the company, and also the data we ran was not correct. When we actually did the focus groups, we found that the people drank their coffee before they went to Walmart in the morning from their favorite brands like Starbucks or the other different brands that are nationally known. So when you're trying to establish a new brand and change someone's consumption patterns, you got to throw hundreds of millions of dollars at it. I ended up losing all my money. And I tell the story to my kids all the time too, to keep everybody humble. Like, yeah, you hear about the ones, I've got 3 unicorns in my fund, but I've lost my share of money and I've been kicked in the teeth and punched and beaten up. I had to do every job on for numerous years, and I can relate strongly to you. And I think that's what drew me to you when I first met you. And we have some good mutual friends too. That I just want fucking warriors. We're going to war when you're in a startup. And with American Gun Owners, I don't want to dwell too much on it because this is a very thoughtful business plan. Obviously, we're building a search recommendation engine. No one's ever built this. We have an exclusive deal with the NRA. But I recently did something that is very unorthodox, and I'm going to say it on this podcast. You know it because I sent you a text. I took the cap table and I gave back 3/4 of the money to the investors who, once we started talking about our plan and how we're going to implement, I realized we're not aligned with my vision of empowering Americans to actually own and carry guns. They just see me as someone who can generate top quartile returns for their funds, which there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but what I realized with this is a mission-driven business. And I need people like you who are fucking warriors. I am a warrior, and I want people on the cap table. I mean, I'm not a conventional entrepreneur. I'm very much an outlier. I see things very asymmetrically. When I see an investor like you has my vision, boom, that's who I want on the cap table. Because I know when I need something from you, you're going to be like, no problem, Michael. When do you need it? How much do you need it? I'm there. And everything to do with you so far has been just like boom, boom, boom. There's not like, oh, I need to give this to my lawyer. That's fine. I'm not criticizing the process. But when you're in a mission-driven business like this, and there's a lot of businesses now that are mission-driven, that are working to kind of preserve the rights that we have in this country, it's a very different investment climate I've found.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot to unpack there, and I totally agree. So first of all, it's like poker, right? Business is like poker. Like nobody really remembers their big wins. They remember their bad beats, right? And your bad beats in business are what teach you the most. If you don't learn from those mistakes, and they are going to come, you just got to pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and move forward. But if you're going to make the same mistakes again, it's going to be a very painful journey. So I like to say there's no lesson in the second kick of a mule. And I've gotten kicked by that mule a bunch.
I haven't heard that one.
But, look, and you brought up another thing, like the speed of trust, right? There's a book by Stephen Covey that I read years ago. If I can trust my partners, then we can move very quickly. But if I have to run anything past lawyers and this and dot the I's and cross the T's, and trust is a great thing to have. And what I found is people who've been in the trenches, who've got the battle wounds, it's easier to trust somebody like that. A lot of my partners that I picked up or agreed to go into business with, especially with COVID, through no fault of their own, got wrecked. Right? So extremely talented people who went from potentially having an exit for hundreds of millions of dollars to being completely broke and really up against it. When I see somebody like that, man, I'm dying to partner with them because they have the skill set and they have the kind of the experience, and they just need a shot. They just need a chance to get back in the game. And when you get beat really bad like that, it's hard to get back in the game because of resources, right? You lost everything. But when you're staring into that abyss, you kind of find what you're made out of. And so anyway, I agree with everything you just said.
It's funny because there is a dichotomy, though, because if you watch Shark Tank, which I've watched for years, and I know some of those guys quite well, one of the things that I find very oxymoronic, if that's even a word, is Cuban's very good at this. He'll spot someone that's failed badly and is really hungry, and he'll just back them on that one premise that you just outlined. But conversely, there are other people who just are a straight line up, like goes to Stanford, has an electrical engineering degree, and builds some new device, and everyone's throwing tons of money at it, and he scales a company, he's an uber superstar. Okay, fine. I find that that's absolutely true too, but it's kind of like it's one extreme or the other, and I'm often drawn to both, and I'm able to relate strongly to both groups. But I just happen to think when it's a mission-driven business, like say what we're doing, which is but it is very much a technological, and it's a data acquisition, and it's a search engine. It's a very powerful tool we're building, but there is a strong mission. I find a lot of the Silicon Valley people that I know in my network as a venture capitalist, when I tell them what I'm doing with this business, they're immediately petrified. Oh, it's guns. Oh, no, we can have nothing to do with guns, because they have investments from endowment funds. And one of their clauses in their LP agreements is no vice businesses, and guns are still considered vice, which is fine because it's just a big white space and they're not seeing it. So anyway.
It's all right. They don't see it. That's more opportunity for us. And,
absolutely.
Look, nothing's easy. So when you start out, I'm always drawn into the enthusiasm of maybe somebody comes out with a new idea, but they don't have those battle scars. I used to have like a kind of a checklist of who I would partner with, and it was you've either been shot at, maybe in combat, you signed the front of a paycheck, not the back, or you staved off bankruptcy, right? Or you beat cancer was the other one. Like if you can do those things, I'm all ears to hear I'm willing to partner with you. And then, the prophet always says it's people, product, process. And with AGO, I saw all of those clearly from, you had me at hello. So.
Well, thank you for that. Do you want to talk a little bit about some alternative investments like Bitcoin and stuff? Because when I met you, we were talking about that, and you helped me make some really good investments at a good time. So I thank you for that a lot. And then I was on it wasn't a podcast, but a live stream talking to the Bitcoin community. And tell us a little bit about your view of Bitcoin and where we're at all-time highs now. Ethereum's cranking. What's going on?
I guess I'm a little bit of what they call a Bitcoin OG. Not because I have any special skill set, but there is something about personality types. If you take the Myers-Briggs, I'll bet you're probably one of these, INTP, ENTP. We're like the 3% that kind of question everything, but we're open to new ideas and we're very intuitive.
Yeah.
And that 3%, we work on like our family and friends, and we're pestering them, and we get to 10%. And when you get to 10% of the population who understands an idea or a new technology, or in this case, a new protocol, the other 90%, according to Malcolm Gladwell, fall like sheep, fall like dominoes. When I first heard about Bitcoin in 2013, or maybe 2012, I didn't understand it, but I did know that a lot of smart people, way smarter than me, were fascinated by it. And, I just said, well, when's the last time that all the smart people in the room were thinking the same way or working on something that failed? not many times. I bought it, but I also bought all the other like cryptocurrencies, all the Ethereums and ADAs and Cardanas and XRP, whatever was out there. I figured I'll buy it all just to diversify. What I came to understand is Bitcoin is a protocol. It's not a technology. What are examples of protocols? Protocols are like the wheel, fire, electricity, TCP/IP. So where technologies like maybe say, we have MySpace and then it was 10x better was Facebook, so Facebook took over. Technologies are winner take most. Protocols like Bitcoin are winner take all. And so Bitcoin is a protocol, and it's very hard to see protocol changes. Just imagine you're the horse and buggy guy and the automobile comes around and he's railing his fist. Do you know how many people, how dangerous that is? And people are gonna die, but they can't see it because they're stuck in the current system, or the current protocol. Bitcoin is got all the best features of money, and it's digital, and it's outside the existing system. So nobody can shut you down. It runs on itself. There's no CEO, there's no marketing team. It's just math. So it's an immutable, finite protocol bounded by energy that cannot be stopped. And it's global. And it's got what's called network effect, which I'm sure, as a VC guy, you understand what that is. That network effect essentially is the more nodes that are in a system, the stronger and more anti-fragile a system becomes. Well, people run nodes in Bitcoin all over the world, so it's global and it's growing every day. So Bitcoin is different than any other crypto. I'm not interested in any other crypto, it's just Bitcoin. And once I realized that, I started dumping a lot of my net worth in. And now what you're seeing, and I'll stop here, is in the early days, it was just guys like me and others smarter than me who were like retail investors, and the price was going up and you had these wild fluctuations based on halving cycles and things like that. Now you've got institutional investment coming in to a finite asset with unlimited demand but limited supply. Mathematically finite, guaranteed. Sovereign nations are coming into this. So we're still early, but we're not like early adopters like I was, luckily, but we're still very, very early into Bitcoin. And I think you haven't seen anything yet. And, anyway, I've gone on and on. I gave you the orange pill elevator speech. But it's a very complicated thing to understand. And I'll stop with this. Somebody gave me a great analogy. It's the analogy of the elephant and the 5 blind men. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this, Mike, but 5 blind men are touching an elephant. One touches the side of the elephant and says it's a wall. The other one grabs the trunk and says it's a snake. The other one grabs the tail and says it's a rope. The other guy's playing around the ear and he thinks it's a fan. You get the point. None of them, they all come from what they kind of think they know, but they're wrong about what they know. The elephant is Bitcoin. And it's a very deep, you got to understand economics, you got to understand history, you got to understand money. What is money? Most people never ask themselves that question. What is money? And why do we need money? So we like to take everybody, I do a Bitcoin Spaces every day called Bitcoin Today. It's 2 hours. We jump in every weekday from 8:30 to 10:30. Sometimes it goes a lot longer, Pacific time. And we meet people where they are. If you understand stocks, there's MicroStrategy stock. It's like a gateway drug to understanding the bigger Bitcoin, right? I understand the trunk. Now I'm going to start to understand the bigger animal that's in front of me. If you understand, bonds, you've got MicroStrategy issues bonds, and it just gets you into it. It's a very, very deep rabbit hole. I still don't know all about Bitcoin, but I know enough to know that that's where I put the majority of my net worth.
It's interesting, Kevin. I listen to you talk, and you say things like guys that are much smarter than me. You're pretty smart, but you're smart in a way that I think we as a society are valuing more and more. And let me explain what I mean by that. You went to military. You had a scholarship. You did it yourself. No one handed you shit. You built businesses, you sold them. You support your family. You make investments in nascent businesses. That's pretty smart to me. Do you have to have a PhD in electrical engineering, or do you have to have gone to Harvard or an Ivy League school to be smart? No, smart is an overused word. It's so multifaceted. I think that we're getting now as a society, maybe it's a reversion back to appreciating people that are decent and principled and hardworking and supportive of our way of life, and not necessarily applying their smarts to making as much money for themselves as possible at all costs. And this is a little slight dig at Wall Street and people that manage monies and do long and short and derivatives. They listen, it's capitalism. I'm all for it. But I think we've lost our way a little bit, where these people are now captains of the universe in most people, especially young people's mind. I talk to so many young people, and all they seem to focus on is trying to get into that world where they can just make $50 million a year as a hedge fund manager or something. And I think if they get into that, they'll find that maybe that's not such a great end goal. I think they should think more about people who actually build things and create and support and honor principles that are beyond just maximizing profits for large entities or individuals or themselves. And so are people smarter than you? Yeah, sure. I mean, if you want to classify intelligence as an IQ test or got an advanced degree, but I kind of like your smarts, Kevin, and people like you. And that's what I'm finding. I'm deploying my capital more and more onto people that have my vision of America, and you embody that. So I thank you for your support on things that I invest in and I'm running, and also for the podcast. And I had one last question for you.
Well, Mike,
what do you want?
Can I just say one thing about that?
Sure.
First of all, I'm honored that you would, I'm humbled that you would say such kind things about me, and thank you very much. I used to think that smart was book smart, and there's a lot of people way smarter than me. I was like a straight, I did okay in classes I was fascinated by, and classes I wasn't fascinated by. Straight C student,
sure.
Right? I mean, I just didn't care enough that, probably could put in the work, but who wants to do that? But I now think that smart is somebody's ability to get things done, right? I know a lot of smart people who don't do shit. They just ideate all day. And I don't know how smart that is. So anyway, thank you for saying that. But my definition of smart has evolved. And a lot of smart comes with experience, right? And there's no substitute for just getting out there. I mean, the key to success is massive action in a directed way.
Agreed. So, Kevin, one last question. This is somewhat, it's quite philosophical, but I want to ask you. So, what do you want your legacy to be?
Wow. Well,
put you on the spot here. You got kids, you got family, you got a ton of friends.
I mean, my legacy, my greatest job is being dad, right? So I want my legacy to be good kids. A lot of people say, do you want your kids to be happy, successful, or good? Well, I want them to be good, because I think the other two can come because of that one thing. It's successful. I know a lot of successful sociopaths, so that doesn't ring true for me. Happy, I know a lot of people who are happy, but that doesn't necessarily make them a good person. So that's job number one. But I think, I was actually thinking about this just earlier today. What do I want my legacy to be? I want my family. Somehow we lost our way where we think that raising a family and then the kids going to the four corners of the world and your grandkids being born elsewhere is some kind of measure of success, financial success or whatever. I think we really need to get back to communities where we're staying together and there's strength in that community. I mean, people are awfully lonely now. We don't join clubs anymore. My mom used to have people over for dinner every Sunday. The whole family would come over, the neighborhood would come over. We communed together. And somewhere we stopped doing that. I think COVID and technology have made that even worse. We are creatures that desire to be around, we're herd animals. We desire to be around other human beings. That is one of the truly valuable things in life, are the people in my life. And when I'm separated from them, or I go months or years without seeing the people that I truly care about, what level of success is that? So I think that along the terms of Bitcoin and to the success I've had, I want the people that I care about to be around me and to be able to enable that in one way or the other. Not through giving people anything, but through giving opportunities and kind of creating an incentive for us to kind of stay together as a unit.
I love that answer. It's a strong version of how I would answer it. And it also goes back again to why I choose people on the cap table for a startup that I'm running. I mean, I'm the CEO of this company. I'm it's my life right now, but I actually want to have people on the cap table that I enjoy being around. That's why I changed the whole structure. And again, not want to get overly soppy on you because I don't spend that much time with you, but I hope to, as we build this, to spend more time with you and get to know your community, because that's what I've decided. Its experience and its people are far more impactful to me than any money has ever been. And I didn't get that when I was younger, I have to admit. And I'm just trying to share this now with my audience and a lot of people that are younger, skew younger in our organization. We have a huge social media following, most of whom are younger. I want them to really think deeply about what you and I said. So thank you, Kevin. Awesome. You're a badass, fantastic partner and supporter. And thanks for being on the show.
Thanks, Michael. I really appreciate it.